Hello, once again, everyone. Another Write Once, Read Many. This time we're talking about 13.9 and 13.10. Vale's arrived, and let's see here. Let's go ahead and we've got the speed drug going. Turn this down a bit further. Cool. I did not end up coming up with a 13.10 question, but the question for this week, 13.9, talk about your initial impressions of the power change that happened to a character. And as we've all read the chapters now, and, I'm just gonna assume spoilers for these chapters is on the table. We all know that's Brian. So we'll talk about our initial impressions of Brian's power change when his second trigger event happened. For the themes, trauma, PTSD. Perfect. Actually, you know what? Vale, you nailed it. That is the question now. 13.10. What do you think of Worm becoming a rom-com? Was it too sudden? Boom. You have sealed your own fate. That's what happens. Let's see here. Vale says, I shall never type a stupid thing ever again in chat. Lesson learned. I don't know. It is you. I think that you are going to type more wonderful questions. Okay. Let's see here. Boop. So yes, for the themes, yeah, they're all like PTSDing out, because, obvious reasons. So, we'll, see it a lot as we go through. Weirdly, for the most, harrowing chapters, there's I guess there's a minor aspect of bullying, but it's from Bonesaw's perspective, she's not even bullying, she's just, I love everything! I love death! She's doing that, her normal shtick. I don't think it can be counted as bullying, so. Anyway. Getting into 13.9, this is probably the lowest moment so far in the book. Tattletale, Imp, Trickster, Sundancer, and Ballistic are knocked out. Skitter is awake but unable to move, and Brian is a fridge. In addition to this, Regent and Rachel, Bitch, are far enough away that they can't meaningfully affect this fight, and they don't know that it's gone wrong like this, so. And same with Genesis. But, let's see here. So, Bonesaw's singing a song to herself, a twist on an old classic, the bones connecting randomly rather than the correct spots. Bonesaw is collecting and inspecting tools, preparing to do her thing, 2 plus 4 times 5 is here, but driving. As is often the case. Skitter's control over her power is very tenuous at the moment, but she's still able to sense where the bugs are and tell them to do the most basic of actions. having been dragged back into the room with the fridge, Skitter can't see Brian, but she can tell that he can see her and, like, the whole scene. And she wants to not go down without a fight, so she says, "I controlled my breathing. In, then out," and gave the order. Attack! I described this as the mental equivalent of a wild scream, and she's got a casual 5-block radius right now, so, that's, I think, as big as we've seen it at this point in the story. She pulls in all the bugs in the whole area to charge Bonesaw. Unfortunately, Bonesaw has more of that aerosol stuff that she used to kill Skitter's previous swarm, and only one hornet gets through and stings Bonesaw. But this is one of those standing orders that kind of just keeps the pressure on as long as there are bugs in the area. It worked on its own, without my direction. It was eerie to track their movements, to see just how much initiative they took without my conscious mind guiding them. They spread out, navigated past obstacles. They organized into ranks and tried to attack her from behind. While she was spraying the ones in front of her, some of the flying insects were even dropping spiders onto Bonesaw. So it's kind of cool seeing her power do, like, probably all the same things she was, telling them to do now, but just kind of in a more basic format. But it's still, like, they're not just flying in from the most obvious angle, like, all in a line to get sniped. They're trying to do something. Bonesaw is annoyed, but explains as she does it that she can turn off her pain sensors by thinking about it, and the venoms aren't going to hurt her because of that pesky tinker body. So, changing things up, Bonesaw makes a smoke cloud that kills most of the bugs in the area, and now has a more or less continuous source of the smoke from test tubes that she's put in her frock pockets. We, the audience, start getting a lesson from Bonesaw in parahuman biology. The Corona Palentia manages the powers that parahumans get and is in different places of the brain for different parahumans, kind of based on the power. And there's also a small portion of the Corona Palentia that's called the Gemma. Bonesaw says that she's really good at finding the Corona and the Gemma, to the point that she can usually guess where it is if she knows the parahuman's powers. The powder that she used on Skitter has the same prions in it that are supposed to cripple the Gemma, but leave the powers intact, so she can experiment with changing Skitter's power, or whoever. But those prions were also in the darts that she used. And I guess for the uninitiated, prions are like misfolded proteins. Only as I was giving that explanation was I like, oh, probably a lot of people don't know what prions are. I mean, not that we have a huge audience, but I don't know. Oh, Greg showed up. Greg knows what prions are. Let's see here. So, Bonesaw is trying to find the edge of Skitter's mask to take it off. As we may recall from previous encounters, the mask extends low on the neck, so most people search too high for the starting point. Continuing the monologue, Bonesaw tells Skitter that the Corona is only about the size of a kiwi and way too small to be controlling their powers, let alone the other aspects like, the energy that it would take to do like Thinker or Tinker powers, or like what is drawing in the energy for any given power, like firing a laser or whatever. Bonesaw tells Skitter that she's excited to find someone who can still use their power after taking prions to the Gemma. Vale says, I'm a prion expert compared to people who never heard of the word before, which is a lot. Yeah. Let's see here. And And so, although she is able to find the corona just by thinking about it, Bonesaw fails to figure out how to pull off Skitter's mask. And having powers that make you smart doesn't actually make you smart. That's one of them Alec lines I wanted to pull back in. A mechanical spider provides a small circular saw, and Bonesaw starts cutting through the mask at the forehead. She talks about something she calls the passenger, which forms the corona, then dies after the powers manifest, but leaves something behind to link a parahuman to their power and make them work. So, Skitter's back to focusing on breathing. Automatic processes of her body are barely working right now. Bonesaw thinks she might find a clue to the passenger because the power is working without a gemma. So she thinks it might be like a gemma that's powerful enough to work anyway. But I don't know. I get the impression that like Taylor's power can work without her gemma. Anyway, the minutia is not actually that important. As she's saying this bit, she's slowly cutting through the mask fabric. The mask is finally peeled off. Taylor thinks about trying to go unconscious by not keeping up her breathing. With a quick scalpel across the forehead, blood starts to flow and get in Taylor's eyes. Greg says, "Hey, if Skitter had a weird flesh mask, Bonesaw would have figured it out instantly. It's one of those multiple intelligences. Meat intelligence." Yes. So, we have a flashback to the first chapter for a moment, and then she says, "How had I gotten from there to here?" Bonesaw says she's really excited and kisses Taylor on the forehead, right where she's bleeding. So, great stuff. The circular saw starts up, then stops working because of all the dense spider webs and stuff clogging it up. Bonesaw steps out to get a bigger saw from the other room, and Taylor is only able to move her fingertips and eyes when she's like trying to experiment with what she can do. Feeling like there's nothing, she can't give complex orders to the bugs like normal. She reaches out to her only remaining ally. "Help!" I tried, putting every iota of willpower into the command that I could, but the passenger does not answer her. So, and this is something we'll see her do a number of times throughout the story, like, pretty much never getting results, but, I don't know, I think that she gets a lot of background information, that, like, whenever she has, like, moments of instinct of, like, I don't know, if she sees like a duplicator and knows which one's the real one or something. Like if there's a moment like that, then it's like that's her power subtly guiding her. But whenever she thinks about it, it's kind of like the forget power that Imp has. That's like the trigger vision thing, where it makes you forget the more you try and think about it. And the only way to remember is to not try to remember it all. So by it's also like how you can't have a trigger event or second trigger if that's what you are trying to do. The powers are very they buck authority a lot, I would say. The bugs aren't able to sense Bonesaw or smart enough without Taylor's mind behind them to know that she's wherever the smoke cloud's billowing. Instead, they search the area for people to try and find their target. Taylor's able to sense that none of her teammates are moving and no one's coming to save them. Sad. She's having waves of regret as their situation sets in. She hadn't liked Trickster's plan, but She'd been too worn out to think of anything else and wanted to go to save Brian as soon as they could. I wanted to give up, but a bigger, more stubborn, sturdier part of my brain refused to let me. You know, Taylor's a badass or whatever. We can all admit it. We like Taylor. Bonesaw comes in the room asking about threads. Taylor's confused because she hadn't set up any tripwires since she'd been so focused on finding Brian. No one had entered the building, but the bugs felt movement anyway. There was something big that was approaching down the hallway. It's a huge stuffed animal. Perian must be here, but Taylor's unable to find her. So complaining about the lack of outlets, Bonesaw is able to get the saw going, and she says she's going to cut through Taylor's skull because she can't go up through the nose with the equipment that she has on hand. Too bad. You always love having things put up your nose. The stuffed animal had walked past where they were, but the noise from the saw starts up, and then it turns around, clearly able to hear. Oh, Greg says, threads. Taylor's confused because she hasn't been posting on PHO recently. Yeah. So, as a stalling tactic to give the stuffed animal time to reach them, Taylor looks at Bonesaw and deliberately blinks 3 times in a row. Bonesaw is interested in a possible dialogue, and they start going back and forth. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Playing 20 questions, Taylor's able to get her to start talking about her art. So Bonesaw asks her if she wants to know what she's going to do to Taylor after her research. Why not? Knowing had to be better than wondering. And you know what? Knowing doesn't have to be better than wondering. I've heard it described before on, it was on We've Got Worm, I think. I believe it was Scott saying that it's like, it was worse than he thought it could be, or something like that, something similar. And I just like wholeheartedly agree. It's just like, before I had heard it, I wouldn't have thought that up, probably. So it actually is worse. Bonesaw says that she'll set Taylor's power to always draw in all the bugs around her, and that they would build nests inside her to make her a living hive. And then in addition to the regular control frame she implants into people, into their skeletons, she would also give Taylor an exoskeleton, compound eyes, and claws. Won't that be fun? My Bonesaw voice is crazy. Let's see here. 2 + 4 × 5 says dialogue, more like dialogue, using the beautiful backwards D, and also it being a 3-part word where the first part is death. Die. So, each at one edge of Taylor's peripheral vision. And I've always thought of this scene like left, right, reversed in the past until I read it like this week. I was like, oh, weird. Bonesaw is on the left and Perian's on the right. But for some reason, my brain just can only imagine it like I can like force it into place, but it feels like Bonesaw should be on the right and Perian should be on the left. That's just the way I would block the scene in a movie. I have no idea why that is, but 2 + 4 × 5 has to clock in. Well, we will look forward to your commentary if you leave any in the Discord later about this. Vale says goodbye to 2 + 4 × 5. Can't believe you just said it feels like Bonesaw should be in the right. She's totally in the wrong. Yes. That's definitely what I said. Not that I think that visually I want the villain to be on one specific side of the screen. Because I think of I think of all these different major conflicts. Like Spider-Man, Miles Morales walks in on the left side of the speeding train and fights Kingpin. In the second movie, when there's a throwaway joke about him using his electricity power on a guy who's blocking the tracks, like some villain of the week guy, then he's on the left, the villain's on the right. I just feel like it's such a common blocking for the protagonist to be on the left. But also, I am crazy, so... Anyway. So, it's Perry and Dino squaring off. "That's really rude," yells Bonesaw. And... Oh, you know what? I jumped down a line. I didn't read this paragraph. That the stuffed animal was only one room away, and Taylor was starting to pass out from losing blood, but Bonesaw wouldn't let her stall anymore either, so she turns the saw on and starts cutting/grinding through Taylor's skull. Very fun. The sound of the saw alerts the stuffed animal once more, and it charges in, smashing Bonesaw to the ground. My rescuer was some kind of cartoonish dinosaur made of black and blue fabric. I could see the logo of this health club repeated several times over the stuffed animal's exterior. Vale says, "If I were a world-class movie producer, I would make sure my next movie always had heroes to the right, just to prove you wrong." Oh my god, Vale's ruining my life. So... Then I already talked about that part. So... Bonesaw's saying that's really rude, but she is an endlessly rude character. Snapping her fingers, Bonesaw sets all the mechanical spiders to attacking the dinosaur, and the dino is just smashing through the spiders like it's like pretty quick work of all of them. And it continues to advance, and then Bonesaw starts doing something ominous with test tubes, then gets smashed hard enough that she's thrown across the room-ish. I mean, not super far, but she's thrown into a metal shelf and dents the metal shelf. The dinosaur was hit by one of the test tubes, though, because Bonesaw did manage to finish preparing her stuff. And then it starts to... Before it starts to deflate because of what happens, she gets in a good, bunch of hits, just pounding Bonesaw into the wall. So that's pretty cool. And I mean, it's the same super strength she had used to send her flying before. But the material used to make up the dino starts bleaching, and then holes start appearing in it, and then Perion's control is lost, and it sort of explosively deflates like we've seen it do in the past when Leviathan broke one. Revealing Perion inside. Using her power, she gets out of the dino and she rips her sleeve off to stop the effect from, drawing up her own clothes as well. And then, Perion seems to have done some real damage to Bonesaw's face. Her nose is gushing blood and, her cheek is caved in. Bonesaw says, "Rude." Then they have... pretty tragic back and forth. Initially, I was going to, draw a lot of the, dialogue into this and read it, but I just didn't end up doing that. Perion says that her mom, aunt, best friend, and cousin were all here. Taylor's freaking out because she knows Perion needs to stop talking and attack. Bonesaw successfully continues to stall, saying they didn't kill everyone, and going on to detail about how they gave them these awful plastic surgeries to make them into the decoys that we saw in the previous chapter. After Bonesaw's little speech cements her demon status that we've already seen actively, Perion throws dozens of needles at Bonesaw, and they stick into her, all over, including, her face. And so they have threads stretching between the two of them now. And of course, Perion's power is like telekinesis that requires a like thread-like material or fabric to work. So now she's able to grab with her thready hand Bonesaw into the air, and Bonesaw destroys one of her own teeth. She's saying that Perion was playing too rough with the dinosaur, using that lie to cover the tooth crack stuff. Perion, pulls Bonesaw into the air and suspends her there with the needles. Taylor knows that the tooth is a trap. She's like, I can't alert Perion, but I know that Bonesaw would have super teeth. And then, so, I don't want to do this. I never wanted to fight, but I can't let you walk away. That's the most important thing. I'm willing to compromise what I believe in. Compromise myself to do that. Bonesaw rolled her eyes. I think that's a pretty good comedy beat there when Bonesaw rolls her eyes, honestly. Vale says, I kind of like to know why Perion had a larger than human-sized dinosaur costume. Like, was this something she made for story time for her territory kids, or was it her idea of an implement of war? I think she just whipped it together as fast as she could, and I mean, dino form was as good as whatever else. I think it's weird that it doesn't say what kind of dinosaur, but I have to assume it's like some generic-y, like, Stegosaurus, maybe? Or maybe like I just think it's one of those ones with like the, like, flat, like, big feet, not like little T-Rex hands, because it's punching the shit out of somebody, Yeah, I know, Vale. T-Rex with tiny arms is more fun. I just don't think it's realistic to the story beats. Anyway. With some one-word commands, we get wall, barrier. Now Taylor really is calling out her anime moves to her bugs in her mind. But she's desperately trying to do something with her bugs to get Perion's attention, but Perion ignores her, and she moves up with one of the scalpels that Bonesaw had been using, and in like a super hardcore moment, she stabs Bonesaw in the neck just over and over, and unfortunately, this does not do the trick, because it is Bonesaw we're talking about. And then Bonesaw's able to spit whatever compound she had in the tooth, and it strikes Perion's mask. And Perion tears off the mask and moves for the sink kind of blindly. Because I think it probably got on her face, even though she was wearing a mask. That type of thing. Bonesaw's face is melting a bit too, from some of the chemical being in her mouth and getting on her lips as she spat it. Greg says, Taylor slash the Lich. Full. Oh, man. Ron Perlman's voice acting in Adventure Time is top-notch. Let's see here. So while Perion tries to wash her eyes out, Bonesaw keeps spitting and destroys the threads that are still holding her there, suspended in the air. Burn my tongue! She sticks out her tongue to show, and it's clearly got terrible chemical burns all over. The sink doesn't have running water, and Perion kind of collapses as Bonesaw tells her, You're lucky I'm so nice. If I was a less forgiving person, I'd make you regret that. So Bonesaw tells her she's going to finish up with the others and then move on to her. Jack enters the scene, like Kramer walking in. And he's got Burn Scar with him too, which finally makes Taylor lose all hope when she hears Jack's voice. Bonesaw is telling Jack how excited she is and how great today has been. Jack points out her burned mouth, not even mentioning like her smashed in face. Bonesaw explains that she got ambushed and she'll fix herself when she's done with these guys. Jack says she needs to finish up because they're going. So Bonesaw protests that the idea that they're leaving. And Jack explains that they need to leave now before the enemy is able to regroup. They're already successfully stalling Crawler and Siberian. Bonesaw says that she needs to do research, and Jack agrees to let her take 3 of them with her. Bonesaw picks Skitter first for the whole conversation about how her power works after the prions. Then Tattletale. She needs to see her brain. And then Trickster to make a replacement for Hackjob, who got fragged by Sundancer in the attack where they nabbed Shatterbird and Cherish and lost Gru. But rip Oni Lee for getting burned up by Sundancer. Those familiar with Ward will know that there is rip for none of us. None of us shall rip. Once she's picked 3 of them, Jack says, finish off the rest. And it's kind of haunting, like, just how casual it is in this moment and how close it all feels to happening. We obviously know how awful Jack is from the start, etc., but in this moment, everything just feels so dire and imminent, even more than, like, normal. Bonesaw makes sure it's okay that she leaves Brian alive. Jack agrees. He thinks it's a good idea. And Bonesaw decides that the order to kill the others should be the order that they captured them, or that she captured them. So she starts up the circular saw, intending to kill Imp first. Brian has a very strong reaction, enough so that they stop and they stare at Brian as he's making choking noises from the fridge. And, you know, Bonesaw, again, despite all her rude talk, she just fucking loves it when other people are in pain or when they react to things negatively. It is her #1 joy in life. Just a real piece of shit. She probably slicks back her hair. She probably eats sloppy steaks. Can't help herself. Let's see here. So, Bonesaw does the thing she does, where she says something so annoying that we somehow hate her even more than before. If nothing else, she can keep finding new lows throughout the story. The thing she explains is that Imp walked into a wolf trap, then turned off her power to beg the Nine for help, leading, of course, to her capture. Jack is getting impatient with Bonesaw, wasting time. She likes watching Brian's negative reactions as she threatens Imp and Skitter. His heartbeat's racing up, or whatever. Vale, what is a sloppy steak, you ask? Well, a sloppy steak is a normal steak, but you pour a bunch of water on top of it. I don't understand the appeal, but, you know, if you're a real piece of shit, you probably eat sloppy steaks, slick back your hair, you know, the whole 9 yards. I'm gonna link you the sketch from I Think You Should Leave, which is a show, after the stream, and then you too can know of people with slicked back hair. Vale says, okay, that is worse than a boiled steak. Thank you for letting me know worse things exist. Or always finding new lows together. So Jack tells Burnscar to kill the others, and Bonesaw's upset that she doesn't get to kill them. He tells her she missed her chance by getting distracted. burn scar starts a flame in her hand, and Brian releases darkness. He doesn't seem to have a lot of control over it, so it just sort of makes a coating on the floor and then like seeps outward a few inches above the ground. Bonesaw gets super excited because what she wanted from Brian before was to see where the darkness came from. And she wants to get that data, but Jack won't let her go back for the hard drive. Suddenly, Taylor has a trigger vision that I'll talk about in the powers knowledge section. Despite trying to hold on to the memory, it's fading nearly as fast as it began. She realizes as she gets back to reality that she's still in the void. Brian's darkness is different now, and seems to flow through her. She feels it as it touches her heart, her wounds, her brain. As this happens, she feels her power slip a little further from her grasp. Able to sense the bugs but not control them, she feels everyone in the room, and there's one more person than before. One more person who we can see on this very screen. It's the Phantom Brian from the art image here. Greg says, they can ask you not to do sloppy steaks, but they can't stop you from ordering a steak and a glass of water. Vale says, ice water? No, just tepid tap water, please. Yeah. So, let's see here. So Taylor, the man strides through the darkness as though it wasn't there and grabs Burn Scar by the face. I forgot to mention it, but Burn Scar picked up Taylor. So, she's right. They're right next to each other. They're point blank. And then this mystery figure smashes her head into and through the counter, completely destroying her face and killing her despite any Bonesaw enhancements she might be sporting. The figure disappears and some of the darkness clears away. Jack thinks that this is pretty interesting. Clearly not concerned that Burnscar is dead and gone. Bonesaw is ecstatic that she might have captured the data on a second trigger, which she hasn't managed to get before. Like I talked about previously, when they're trying to force a trigger event or to force a power to work in a certain way, it generally will fight against you and not do that thing. So that's why she's never managed it before. Jack tells her she'll have to leave it behind. She starts going for the hard drive anyway, and he grabs her. Bonesaw slips his grip and says she'll be right back. Vale says, this is one of my favorite Vic has made so far. It is so clean. Yeah, let me see what I had said to her in our chat earlier. I said, just saw the art, very nice. Vale is going to love this one. So, somehow I knew. As Bonesaw gets into the fridge and opens a little mannequin cage to nab the drive, the figure appears again in the corner of the fridge. It was Brian, but it wasn't. It was colored in monochrome, with one eye open and the other half formed. Markings in white covered his flesh, spiraling out from one pectoral, covering his chest and stomach. It's kind of interesting that, like, his has one eye. Not that this is probably connected or anything that Wildbow is thinking about, but it just made me think about how the person hit by Alexandria was hit by Siberian and missing one eye. I guess I'm not supposed to. Anyway, there's the missing eye connection on this in like a weird, not the same, but they rhyme kind of way. You know, ring theory. Sorry, most people don't know what I'm talking about when I make a joke about ring theory of storytelling, but it's making fun of the way the Star Wars prequels were crafted around the original movies. It's like a thing that George Lucas is really into. And Sometimes it's just really funny. Phantom Brian grabs Bonesaw by the hands and raises her off the ground. Jack says, "The things I put up with." Then Jack slashes at the Phantom Brian, which has no effect. Changing tactics, he grabs a cleaver and hacks off Bonesaw's hands and wrists. As she drops to the ground, she starts running, and Jack helps his handless companion escape. When Phantom Brian tries to leap after them, he accidentally breaks the floor under himself and flickers out of existence. Brian glares at nothing in particular, and instead of manifesting another phantom image of himself, his body starts to slowly pull itself back together. Taylor's perception of time is pretty thrown off, but she estimates that it takes between 5 and 10 minutes for his body to reform, and his organs to pull their way out of the cages they're in. He even heals the wounds that he had had from the past, like the deep cuts that Cricket had given him in Arc 7. He stops healing for a moment. Phantom Brian appears again and tears out all the metal, bolts or whatever, holding him to the wall. And then setting his body on the ground, then dragging it over next to Taylor. He had another trigger event? 2 new powers? 3 if I counted the way his power was diminishing my own. So, holding Taylor's hands, she can feel something happening. It takes her a little bit to figure out how to accept the power he's granting her, but she starts to heal quickly. It's painful, but the wounds on her head close up. Then her skin and muscles, finally her power, are all healed. Taylor struggles to a standing position. Brian hurries to move to each person in the room, healing them. 4 new powers? When they're all up and the darkness dissipates, Taylor tries to ask him what that was, but stops as he sees Brian on all fours with tears on his face. When she reaches out for him, Tattletale grabs Taylor's wrist and wordlessly shakes her head. Tattletale whispers something to Imp, and Imp says to Brian, "Hey, big brother, let's get out of here." Brian stands by himself, refusing Imp's offered help. They start to leave the area. Brian is moving very slowly, but no one urges him to go faster. A thin layer of darkness is perpetually boiling off of him. As the chapter ends, Taylor feels more helpless than ever, having no idea how to help. Damn! That chapter's crazy! I know a lot of people have a negative first reaction to the power change and stuff, but I don't know, I was here for it. When it happened, and even before I understood what it really was, and I thought it was he just has a bunch of powers now, I was like, maybe that's what, a second trigger event does, is it opens the, valve to all the power combinations that your normal power would, have thrown away to give you your really specific thing. I don't know. I was just Brian is crazy powered now. And I kind of had thought that a second trigger event isn't just strictly a power-up, it's a power change. But I had thought at the time that it would be kind of just a level up. And the way that this story is formatted already, I didn't feel like parahumans are not power scaled to each other. Some of them have really, really powerful powers. Stupidly off the charts, better than your powers. And other people have normal powers. So Brian going from having a normal power, a pretty okay street level power, to being off the charts, I thought all right, maybe he's just a legend now or something, that kind of level. Let's see here. Vil says some are super powerful, some are excellent at knitting. Yeah. And I would say that Boop, 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 boop. Get out of here. Sorry, the dog wanted out. I would say that there are a lot of drawbacks to the way the darkness works now. It's not as easy to throw it over areas and, like, cover their retreats or whatever. It's because it's slower to come out. So it can still be used for the same things, but because it's not as quick, they can't just, like, smoke bomb or anything. I don't know. There's ups and downs, but I do think it's overall slightly better. But if I had the power, I would rather have the first version of his power. Yeah. Although I'd take the change if it let me re-heal my body from that. Oh, and because it was crawler healing, Brian kind of just has a slightly souped up power, or body, which is kind of cool. Vale says, I'd 100% rather have the second version. The problem is that, like, we kind of see throughout the story, there aren't that many powers that are that good for him to take a share of. Like, I don't know, I kind of feel like it just doesn't work out very well when he does it. But I don't know. Let's see here. Other chapter thoughts. It's a super long chapter. I think it's on the longer side of the chapters that we've seen so far. We learned tons of new parahumans information. When we get to the powers knowledge section, I just have huge chunks that I lifted because I'm like, okay, I need to talk about the weird stuff that Bonesaw talks about for, like, parahuman biology. I kind of want the trigger event. Like, yeah. So there'll be large parts we talk about there. I think I can move on to... Oh, and it's got like a very cool fight scene, I think, between Parian and Bonesaw. Like, I think Parian comes off as very strong in this. I know she loses, but, like, I wouldn't want to fucking fight Parian. Have her throw a zillion needles in my, like, whole body and rip me apart. Not that she would do that to just any old person, but you know what I'm saying. Her upper limits are clearly pretty, like, crazy. Her bag of tricks is clearly pretty deep. And she hasn't even, like, done hardly any fighting up to this point. I think she's been in one fight with Leviathan. Maybe she's had some skirmishes post-Leviathan with, like, merchants or whatever. But they're normies. They don't have powers. 13.10. The chapter opens with Taylor waking up in Brian's HQ. The whole crew who is there, aside from Parian, has come here as a group because it was the closest base to Dolltown. And also they wanted Brian to feel more comfortable because it's like his own space. So Taylor had intended to stay up, but she had immediately crashed by accident and fallen asleep. It's dusk outside, so it's been a few hours. And Taylor realizes that there is a blanket over her. Someone else must have put it on her. And that fact alone, like that she didn't notice, perturbs her to the point that she can't get back to sleep. Which is the thing that she wants to do. Lisa and Aisha were sleeping on a bed in the same room. Taylor starts sort of ruminating about Dinah and what Cherish had said, as well as her new anxieties about Brian. And because she always, like, does bug stuff whenever she's feeling down, and because she knows she's not going to fall back asleep, Taylor starts doing bug stuffs. She feels around to find everybody. Sundancer is sleeping in another room. In the same room, Bitch and the dogs are laying down on another bed. Trickster and Ballistic are patrolling outside. And Genesis needed to recharge her power, so she's awake and, like, tending to things at the base and checking in with Coyle and Noelle and whatever. And so Perian, who had stayed at Dolltown, was trying to find her people who were still alive and like figure out the situation. Taylor felt bad for leaving on Perian on her own, but decided that she needed to focus on Brian. And so I pulled this chunk out and I did the the thing where you cut out a piece of a quote, but seems Brian's commentary was ultimately on target. When the cards were down, we protected and helped the people we cared about, and we ignored the greater suffering of the world beyond that. Yeah. She feels bad about herself. But like, you can only do so much. You can't save everyone all the time. Uncomfortable with these thoughts, Taylor finds Brian with her bugs, and once she feels the darkness flow through them, she doesn't move them closer, thinking he might still be asleep. But then he picks up a bug and starts talking to it. She gets up and goes to him. She can feel her injuries from the fights with Mannequin and Burnscar are gone. So the only like body problem she's having is the stiffness from her like weird sleeping position, and then she's got like itchy eyes. When she reaches Brian's room, they start to have an awkward conversation. His stare reminds Taylor of Rachel. Taylor's paralyzed with indecision, having no idea what to do to help him, until he asks her to keep him company. She sits down on the couch and asks if he's hurt. He shakes his head, but doesn't say anything. Taylor asks him about his new power, but instead of saying what it is, he makes a little tendril of darkness from his hand. Then he does say, the new stuff is slower to create, but spreads faster. But the other powers, I counted at least 4. 1 new ability. Not wanting to argue, Taylor just waits for him to expand on that. He extends the tendril to her, and she jumps up in alarm when it touches her head. There's more awkward silence, and they, after they both had that panic response, and they're standing facing each other. Once he relaxes, Taylor apologizes, but asks if he can skip the demonstration and sits back on the couch. Brian says his power has always had some effect on other capes, essentially describing what the PRT would classify as a trump power. But now instead of just dampening powers, he can connect himself to a parahuman in his darkness and use part of their power he's taking away from them. He can only use one power at a time, but he was able to use the Mystery Cape's power to manifest the Phantom Brian and regenerate his body with Crawler's power, then heal his friends with Othallo's power. At first, Taylor suggests that Phantom Brian was Genesis, but he says that it wasn't. Things don't line up with how her power works, or with how powerful that power was, given that he's only able to access a portion of a given power. It was more like a force field, except not. A hole in reality, and it took something out of me to feed and shape itself. Taylor realizes why her eyes have been hurting this whole chapter. She didn't take out her contacts before crashing. After she takes out one of the lenses, she realizes this is a mistake because she can't read Brian's expression without them in. She does leave the other one in, I think, because later in the chapter she talks about like being able to see the T set or whatever, with her one in. But it must be pretty, I don't know, probably disorienting to be trying to read his expression with one contact lens in, one out, and not explaining why she's not taking out the second one, and not wanting to explain why she'd be putting back in the first one. But she tries to bring up, she did take them both out? Okay. Weird. Well, that being said, with them both taken out, she tries to bring him, she tries to bring up him getting on her case for not sleeping, but in a fun way, and it does not land well with him. Taylor apologizes with one of those non-specific apologies when you that you give when you feel bad and awkward. Thinking back, Taylor can't remember ever talking to Brian about normal things. They've always talked about capes, capers, and fighting, you know? Why am I right open? If you can... Other context. Oh, yeah, I was half blind. Gotcha, yep. Yep, you're right. And, you know, the way I wrote it in the thing is I thought they were taking both out, but I guess I somehow convinced myself between writing it and now. I don't know. I don't know what happened. So, for this next section, I had written a bunch of stuff. I had written summaries of their various conversations, and then I went back and just deleted it all, because I was like, I'm just going to do a dramatic reading, for the most part, of their lines to each other, because I do this show for me. So, yeah. That being said, you shouldn't have come for me. What? You should have left me there. I was as good as dead, throwing away your life and the rest of the team to try and rescue me. You're not thinking straight. There's no way I'd leave you behind. Right, because you're supposedly in love with me, so you go rushing off to rescue me. Taylor is deeply hurt by not only what Brian is saying, but by his tone and demeanor. She starts to think of Emma and how her closest confidant had flipped on her and turned everything she said and had shared in earnest into weapons. Vale says, wait, is this really Brian? The read is so perfect. That wasn't why we came to help you. And it wasn't just me making the call. Really? Because I remember you were the one who stopped Ballistic from putting me out of my misery. I would have done the same thing for Bitch, or Lisa, or Alec even. Are you seriously telling me you wish I'd let you die? You're alive now! It worked out! Because we got lucky! Christ, you always do this! Taylor notices how loud they're being and tries to check on the others, lowering her voice. She asks what he means. You're smarter than average, so you count on your ability to think up solutions on the fly. You throw yourself into these reckless situations, push and vote for the risky plans because you know that's a situation where you thrive, where you offer the most to the group. Every step of the way you do it, pushing all-out assault on the wards at the bank, charging in to fight Lung after taking on Oni Lee, the fundraiser, confronting Purity, attacking Leviathan with zero backup, the attack on the wards HQ. Stop! You say you're not manipulative, that your undercover operation was pure in motive, but you are. You throw yourself into these situations solo, or you join in on whatever fucked up plan the others have come up with. And you do it because it makes you useful, because you know we'd struggle without you. You're making us dependent on you. That's not what I'm doing. Every step of the way, I had reasons, strategies, or there were people I needed to help. Maybe Bitch was right about you all along. That's not fair. Taylor's able to justify to herself that this isn't really what he thinks, and it's after effects of the trauma. But this rings hollow to her, and she's worried that this is what he's really been thinking all along. What's not fair is that I'm the one who tried to keep things sensible, to keep this group sane. When push comes to shove, when I go with the majority because things won't go smoothly if I don't, I'm the one who gets captured and tortured. Your plan. Don't. Are you going to tell me I'm wrong? It wasn't fair. You're right. But I don't deserve all the blame here. I volunteered to be the person Trickster swapped out, knowing there was no way you could with your injury. So you let me. Tell me, Taylor, if you don't deserve the blame, who does? The 9, Bonesaw. But I could hardly say that. So, Taylor is crying at this point and trying to blink the tears out of her eyes. I'll own up to it. My fault. The blame is at least partially mine, but maybe mostly mine. I've been reckless, and the others have suffered for it. Dinah, my dad, bitch, the people in my territory, you. Maybe I am toxic. Maybe me and my motivations, my issues, are causing everyone misery. I can leave the team if you want. Give me the word and I'll leave. Christ. I'm not telling you to leave. You're making it clear I should, and you're probably right. I'm so frustrated, and I went too far. That's not what I'm trying to say. Sure sounds like it. Taylor starts to get up and get her armor ready, worried she might get ambushed as she leaves. I'm gonna go. Half of my territory burned to the ground. My people need some attention. If you decide everyone's better off with me gone, just pass on the word. I won't make a fuss. I won't say you wanted me gone. I'll just make an excuse and leave. Taylor's thoughts are kind of spiraling. She wants to check on her territory, then turn it over to Tattletale or Regent. Her mask is messed up, so she just puts bugs on her face. Stop. She keeps heading for the door. Please. She stops. I've never really said anything like this to anyone, but I'm scared. I'm more powerful now, but I feel more insecure than ever. Taylor doesn't know how to respond to that, and her feelings are all over the place. She wants to hug him and confront him, but and comfort him, but she is also emotionally on the edge, just like he is, and gets really mad on the inside. Vale says, such a romantic scene. Who would have thought? So Taylor doesn't know how to... Oh, yeah, I said that. I'm sorry. I'm on the edge. I'm spooked. I can't calm down. I shouldn't have said what I did. And you can't stop thinking. I feel like that all the time, and I have for a while. They had Aisha. So much of what I've done because I wanted to support her. Make up for the fact that I wasn't there when she needed it before. Only we're putting her in more danger, and she doesn't respect me enough to let me keep her out of danger. And as long as I'm being honest and upfront, I was thinking about you when I had my trigger event. I won't lie and say I've suddenly realized I'm in love with you. I don't really know what I feel, so I can only comment on what I think. I can say I respect you on a lot of levels, even if I can't figure you out. Sure as hell didn't sound like that you respected me 30 seconds ago. I worry about you. You throw yourself into these situations like you don't care if you die. Like you've got nothing to stick around for except for those people you insist on protecting. Dinah, the people in your territory, people you barely know, if at all. And then you actually make it out okay. So you do it again, only more so. Riskier stuff. I start thinking about how I'm supposed to protect you, get you to stop, get you to focus on a goal that's actually attainable. Because you're so capable that you could be amazing if you stopped acting suicidal. Then I get pissed at myself, and I get pissed at you, because I can't figure you out, and you move forward so fast I can't keep up. I let my guard drop for the one evening to focus on other things, and then I find out you got in a fight with Mannequin. It's not your job to look after me. If you want to get on my case because I'm putting you and the others at risk, that's fine. It's your right to yell at me for that, but don't make me feel bad because you can't be the macho guy protecting me. That's not... No. I'm trying to say I think about you more than I should. Stay? When I asked you to keep me company, I was being genuine. Rather not be alone with my thoughts. So Taylor says that she's going to make herself some tea and offers coffee, which he refuses. When she's out making the tea, she calls Cranston, her contact with Coil's group. She requests glasses be made for her since they've taken out Shatterbird, and Cranston says that she'll have them ready by the morning. Then Taylor has a message to be passed on to the PRT from her. Tell them Burnscar's dead, and Bonesaw's missing a pair of hands for at least a little while. 4.5 members left, If they were being honest about waiting for the right moment to strike, this is probably a good one. And we can give them the location of the 9 if they're interested. One last thing. Tell them, thanks for the help. After some fumbling social moments that make a lot of people have bad thoughts about Taylor in this chapter, she hits him with the thanks for the help, and I think she wins a lot of people back. Man, I remember listening to We've Got Worm, and they're so hard on Taylor about the way she acts in this chapter, but I don't think that they were giving her the grace that whatever Brian's gone through, she has equally gone through, like, just terrible, terrible stuff, and has, like, just a cocktail of all the worst, like, emotions of, like, anxiety and shame and grief and fear. So, you know, she's in a pretty bad place. So Taylor hangs up and goes back to Brian. She's brought him a water since he didn't want the coffee. He's sitting in the middle of the couch, but when she sits next to him, neither of them make body contact. They watch TV in silence, and she thinks about how he confessed he has feelings for her, and they're sharing parts of themselves they've never shared before. But this isn't the way she wanted things to go. Sad. Final chapter thoughts. This one's amazing. Like, I think this might be the best denouement chapter so far. Is so good. I love it. If you couldn't tell. Yeah, that was a lot of fun for me, being able to read out their stuff. Yeah. Chapter. If you have any chapter thoughts, feel free to type them. I think I have kind of talked it out on that one. Vale says, it's such an honest chapter. Yep, I agree. They're very, they go hard of the matter. They bring up a lot of issues that have been under the surface for a long time. As for how these two chapters relate to the arc, they are, of course, the final climactic fight, which Taylor can hardly participate in. Like, an incredible trove of knowledge for, like, our understanding of powers, and we've now, like, witnessed a second trigger event, which, you know, are like kind of these, like, whoa, it's a crazy narwhal had one, and she can cut people in half with her force fields. You know, it's a whole thing. We've wanted to see one. I think generally once you hear about it in the book, you're like, I gotta hear about it. And then, like I said just a second ago, 13.10 is like the ultimate character growth denouement, like talk out their feelings chapter. It's an all-timer. Yeah. Moving on to the characters, we've got Bonesaw. I pulled out this quote. Outlet. Need an outlet. You'd think there'd be more in a kitchen, but no. And I do think her lines are just so funny sometimes. She's so terrible. Yeah, I think I basically said what I wanted to say about her earlier during the chapter, because I just, it flowed out of me. She's just such a little demon. Yeah, anyway. Jack, only a matter of time before they engage in one good flank and blindside one of the three of us. Or one of us three. We leave now, and all they remember is how hard we hit them and how little they could do. So, when he thinks that only, you know, his closest confidant, Bonesaw, and Burnscar, who's completely under his thumb, are there, then, he kind of lets the mask slip a bit and is like, yeah, we gotta go. Because there are people he can afford to let the mask down with. Vale says, she is not a little demon. She's just focused on science and art. It's important to have people who focus on that, or who have that focus. I don't know. Then next character, the three travelers. They were like justifiably freaking out, huddled in the corner after they get healed by Brian. Aisha, she's pretty reliable here. She only says like one line of dialogue, but it's exactly what needed to be said. Tattletale, again, only does like one little thing, but she nails it. She gets Aisha to help instead of Taylor, which I think was the right choice. Who else do we got? I thought the line where Taylor says, or even Alec. I'd even save that asshole. I thought that was very funny. That was my Alec character note. Let's see, who do we have next? So, maybe do this in another order. I guess I want to mention Rachel, because, Vale says, what if Alec had heard her say that? He would be touched. Even Alec! So, Rachel, we don't really hear from her, but we know that her dogs are safe, which is important, because if we've learned anything recently, it's that her dogs are not inherently safe by plot armor or anything, so, but all three of them are with her. Parian, Parian had to stay behind and has just undergone, like, I don't know, like, as on a par with being tortured by Bonesaw as I think you could get by having the whole, like, all your family got murdered, and not just murdered, but torture murdered. So I think that is very psychically damaging. I think that she has had a fucking bad time of it. Yeah. See, I'm less art focused when I think of people like Parian, who is also an artist. She just wanted to focus on her art, and it's all people like Bonesaw fucking things up, so she can't just do art, and she has to fight instead of doing art. See, Vale? Prove my own point. Anyway, and then we've got, briefly mentioning on Taylor before we get to Science Wins. Briefly mentioning Taylor, this is like, again, as I said, during the chapters, a fucking terrible time for her as well. She is filled with a cocktail of all the worst emotions, and the only thing keeping her together is her sheer grit, I think, and need to help Brian and stuff. So I think that she's gonna, like they would say in anime, let me see you grit those teeth. She's gonna get ready, and she's gonna go out there ready for the fight. But Brian, the star of these two chapters, I would say. This is the biggest leap in Brian development that we'll get in the whole book. He will continue to develop, but, like, never more so than in these two chapters. Like, having the second trigger event is like having a new permanent big trauma. So that's essentially as bad or worse as your original trigger event, which obviously in this case I think it's much worse than his original one. But, yeah, he's going to be, like, dealing with the after effects of this. I mean, like, things don't ever just status quo in this book, but like, really in a bigger way than other events, this is going to stick with him and be noticeable for the rest of the, book. So, it radically changes how he interacts with being a cape and the world. He's still willing to go out there with them and fight, but he's not the same person, Well, he isn't he. You know what I mean. Major pivot point. Yeah, him having, like, it's also big that he opened up to Taylor about his feelings, not only for her, but, like, about himself, because before he never let the mask slip in a healthy way with his team or with anybody. He never could even acknowledge his own feelings to himself, I don't think. Not, like, necessarily the ones about Taylor. I mean the ones about, like, his like, fears and his insecurities. So that's, like a pretty big deal. Yeah, I feel like I could just ramble about it kind of forever, so I am going to move on, but Brian is just so excellent in these two chapters. Cool. Moving on to the powers, knowledge, and world building. I feel a little bad for how large these chunks are, but you at least get to hear my silly bonesaw voice. See, there's this part of the brain that people who study parahumans call the corona pollentia. Not to be confused with the corona radiata. It's part of the brain that's different in parahumans, and it's the part that's used to manage powers. Where the powers can be managed more specifically, there's a part of the corona they call a gemma. That controls the active use of powers, the same way that there are parts of the brain that allow us to coordinate and move our hands. This kind of made me think, in a bigger sense, are there powers that are so always on that affecting someone's gemma would truly not affect them? Because a lot of powers are always on, and have no active, have very little active control mechanism. Like, I'm thinking of, like, Tattletale in particular. Her power, she can't fully stop her power, ever. Even when she wants to. And Greg says, yeah, probably, thinking of Ash Beast. Yeah, that's someone I was thinking about as well. Any power that's always on, I feel like crippling the gemma would do almost nothing. Oh, Vale says, finally, we get to talk science. More science talk, please. Tattletale is able to stop her power, isn't she? I don't think so. Not based on the chapters that we see, especially the one in Ward. She, like, thinks about how she can't stop it. And how, like, taxing it is. Because she, like, desperately wants to be alone from her power. Maybe it's a little more ambiguous in her Worm chapter. She gets headaches using her power in, like, an intentional, like, way and going down the rabbit hole with it, but, like, just looking at stuff will trigger the involuntary use of her power. Like, she has a very similar thing to Dinah, where other people can trigger Dinah's thinker power. I think just being in a stimulating environment will trigger Tattletale's thinker power. That's why she has to be, like, alone in a dark room, a dark, silent room, when she has her thinker headaches, which no medicine can, like, assist with. So, yeah. I think it has a lot more to do with the amount she's, like, focus using it and the amount of general stimuli she's receiving. But, and there's other people with always-on powers, like Naphtha, although I can't exactly describe his power. I vaguely know what it is, but not really. Oakville says, makes sense. I never thought of it that way. So next little bit from our young professor. The size, shape, and location of the corona and the gemma changes from parahuman to parahuman, but it tends to sit between the frontal and parietal lobe, beneath the crown of the head, if you will. They can't really lobotomize the corona in criminals. Some of that's because the location and shape of the corona depends on the powers and how they work, and trial and error doesn't work with the scary bad guys who can melt flesh or breathe lasers. I also really like the phrase, breathe lasers. Well, maybe not phrase, but you know what I mean. And then, dealio is, the corona is way too small to be doing what it's doing. As parahumans, our brains are doing these amazing things, the framework, all the details our minds are using to decide what works and what doesn't. The sheer potential. Even the energy we're using. It's too much for our brains to process. It's way too much for a growth that's no bigger than a kiwi. All of that? It's got to come from somewhere. And the other reason you can't just carve out the corona, if you do, the powers still work on their own. The person just can't control them. It becomes instinctive instead. So I like that Bonesaw says dealio here. I find that incredibly funny. Vale says laser breath was a short-lived villain. His weakness to mirrors was momentary shock before he died. Oh boy. When you're not immune to your own lasers. I'm going to go all out. Way I figure it, I set your gemma lobe to attract bugs around you, then remove it. So you've got no conscious control over it. But there's a point to it. I make some physical modifications to you. See? Implant some mannequin's equipment. So you've got enough sustenance to keep you going, and sustenance to keep your bugs you bring to you alive. You become a living hive, see? We could even make it so they crawl inside you and build nests there. I've got a regular mod for your amygdala to make sure you behave, a frame I implant to your skeleton and heart to help control you, make you stronger, more durable. I figure we'll try for a cosmetic shift. I have to say, I admire this armor, so why not let that, I think this might be a mistake in the text. So why not take that to the logical conclusion? We'll give you an exoskeleton. It'd be awesome. Compound eyes, claws. We'll see how far we can go. Won't that be fun? Wow. The exoskeleton and the building hives inside of her, sounds pretty bad. I don't like the skeletal frame either. Not a fan. I'm just not as into science as Vale is. And then this terrible thing about the plastic surgeries. Some we left alive, so I could give them 5-minute plastic surgery. My spiders handled most of it. Implants under the skin, some chemical dyes for hair. To make them look like us, they're all running around out there, drawing enemy fire and freaking out. It's funny. And of course, it'll take a dozen visits to doctors with less doctors less talented than I to get something even resembling their old faces back. Can you imagine how many people are going to double take when they look at them before they've all been fixed? Like, oh no, it's Siberian, except it isn't. Greg says, not a fan of art or science. I understand. Yeah. So, that's Bonesaw being terrible again. And then I had, basically the entire trigger vision. I was like, I could sum this up, or I could just read it. Which I will try to avoid, but these chapters just had so much stuff that I felt like summarizing it really was taking a lot out of it. So after I had written my summaries, I deleted what I wrote, because I was like, it's just clunky. Because I really wanted to get in the power of the chapters. I don't know. Two beings spiraled through an airless void, past suns, stars, and moons. They rode the ebbs and flows of gravity, ate ambient radiation and light, and drew on other things I couldn't perceive. They slipped portions of themselves in and out of reality to reshape themselves. Plus, further into this reality to ride the pull of one planet, shift into another to ride that slingshot momentum, or to find some other source of momentum elsewhere. 10,000 thousands of each of the two entities existed simultaneously, complemented each other, drew each other forward. They shrugged off even the physical laws that limited the movement of light, moving faster with every instant. The only thing that slowed them was their own desire to stay close, to keep each other in sight and match their speeds. Yet, somehow this movement was graceful, fluid, beautiful even. Two impossible creatures, moving in absolute harmony with the universe, leaving a trail of essence in their wakes. I focused on one of them, and I got the sensation that this wasn't a scene I'd seen before. I could see what it saw. It was looking forward, but not in the distance. 10,000 pictures at once, seeing situations where it arrived at its final destination, Earth. The farther forward it looked, the broader the possibilities. It was looking for something, paring away the branches where the possibilities were few. An Earth in a perpetual winter, an Earth with a population of hundreds, an Earth with a population more than 12 billion that had stalled culturally, a modern dark age with a singular religion, and it communicated with its partner. Signals transmitted, not through noise, but wavelengths transmitted across the most fundamental forces of the universe. In the same way it received information, it worked with its partner to decide the destination. It viewed a world one point in time in the present, and in a heartbeat, it took in trillions of images, billions of individuals, viewed separately and as a tableau. Innumerable scenes, landscapes, fragments of text, even ideas. In that one heartbeat, I saw people who were somehow familiar. A young man, a teenager, out of place among his peers. Men who were burly with muscle. They were drinking. He was tan, with narrow hips, his forehead creased in worry above thick glasses, but his mouth was curled in the smallest of wry smiles over something one of the men was saying. A snapshot, an image of a moment. It was my world, my Earth, it was looking at. Coming to a consensus, it transmitted a decision. Destination. The reply was almost immediate. Agreement. More signals passed between them, blatant and subtle. A melding of minds, a sharing of ideas. As intimate as anything I'd seen, they continued to communicate, focusing on that one world, on the possible futures that could unfold, committing to none, but explored the possibilities that lay before them. They broke apart, the two massive beings that spiraled together, and I gradually lost my glimpse into what they were thinking, what they were communicating. Whatever view they'd had of the future, they were losing it. It was too much to pick through on their own. And then it ends. She snaps back to reality, but is still in the void. Yeah, I love the trigger visions throughout the things, but I think that this is a particularly good one, and it's not said outright, but the young man who is the teenager is Danny, and the reason she's seeing this is because from her power's perspective, it had, and I mean this is all kind of me talking about later stuff, but her power had picked Danny, and then because he never had a trigger event, it switched targets to Taylor. Boom. So the other thing I picked out little line was darkness boiled out of his skin, a thin layer. It moved slower than it had before, thicker, more like tendrils sliding against one another than smoke. Vel says the really cool thing about the trigger visions is how much information is in them once you've read the whole story, and how little is in them when you first read. Yeah, that's the thing, is that, they're really amazing because they are written in this totally different style than, any of the other scenes, and they don't really spoil anything, but they, have so much information in them. So yeah, I'm very interested in them. And the audience participation questions. So it went from 1 to 2 because of Vale. So for 13.9, talk about your initial impressions of the power change that happens to Brian. And 13.10, what do you think of Worm becoming a rom-com? Was it too sudden? Shh, I had nothing to do with that. Don't out me. I will always out you for this, Vale. And so the answers to the questions by Vale are, I don't remember my exact thoughts about it, but it was not positive the first time I read. I think it's important to understand this was the first time I read a web serial. The first time I read Wildbow, I did not have the deep trust of the author or medium that has been earned since then. The situation felt too perfectly contrived, and as much as I appreciate the writing and the outcome, now I still think it was too tidy. That said, I still think it's cool writing and outcome, or I think the writing and outcome are quite cool. Yeah, I mean, obviously I talked about it earlier, but my whole thing was like nearly the opposite. I was just like, I was so hype train after like feeling just so like, I don't know, the oppressive force of the Slaughterhouse 9 and their like the way they feel unstoppable to Taylor really gets through the story, and I felt that as well, and this was just like this was pretty awesome as far as I was concerned. And then the 13.10 Vale's answer is snuggling up on the couch, talking feelings. One character pretends to be someone else as a part of the plot, and the romantic couple discuss it. Brian became monochrome Brian. One member of the couple confesses. One member of the couple goes through a significant change in appearance. Monochrome counts. Friends change to couple. The tropes are all there, though they might be a slightly darker version than usual. I, for one, am all for the new rom-com direction. Clockblocker will be the alternate love interest, I assume. Or Amy! You better believe if Vic was here, she would be telling you how the Amy Taylor ship is the best one. Vale says, that was my impression. It landed for me as too hard a situation that was suddenly miraculously resolved, and I didn't have the trust needed or something. No, I get it. And I'm not discounting your feelings. I just had a very different reaction. And then, for that, we did not get any other answers, but that's all right. For the Piggo chapter, I guess, do you think it's okay for a figure like Piggo to break the rules of the game? Or, I don't know if that's what I want my question to be. Alright, let me have like a 30-second brainstorming session. Oh, you think that's a good question? Alright, well, I will put that as the question then, if you actually think that's good. I kind of thought it was not the best. It's a good topical question. The wording can be loose. I'll work on the wording and then post it. I'll workshop it, and then as the reminder, we'll hear the good version at the start of the next episode. And it'll be in the Discord. So next week will be 13.y. I'm going to start up that end of stream music and read out the links. So start saying some goodbyes now. So, as has been the case since we started the Slaughterhouse 9 stuff, the song being used is Infestation by ScarlettXOX. You can find her at twitch.tv/Scarlet_Rogue. Our Discord link, as well as all the others, can be found in the stream description and the channel description. The author of the work being discussed can be supported on Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. The full text of the work is available for free online at parahumans.wordpress.com. And there is also a fan-made audiobook of the entire work at audioworm.rain-online.org. And then, Vale had said, I 100% completely agree with Pig-O, and also 100% completely disagree with Pig-O. That's why I like the question. And then Vale says, take care as always, thanks. Thank you. And I shall now let the music play as the outro, as it was foretold, because that's what Scarlett wanted me to do.